Hi guys, welcome back. So today I'm doing a little bit of preventative maintenance and I'll be replacing my water pump and thermostat. So I recently went to Germany, to Nürburgring, and one of my friends came along with his n55 135i, and on the way there the water pump had failed. So it was still working, but the housing had fractured and it started losing coolant. So half of our away trip we spent under the car and replacing this water pump. So since my car still has the original water pump in it, I've decided to replace it preventatively along with the thermostat. So the OEM water pump on N52 is Peerberg, and I've gone for the same one. This one comes with new hardware and it looks like it has revised design of the attachment points. So from factory these were bolted directly to the side of the block, where these later versions have bushings around where the bolts attach the water pump to the side of the block. And my guess is this was done to eliminate some of the vibrations transmitted from the block and from the combustion process onto the water pump, which I'm assuming is playing a role in those water pumps failing. So that's good, and while we're there we'll be replacing the thermostat as well. This one is a Beha thermostat, so it's an OEM brand. I'm not sure whether it's OEM to the 330i N52, but it's an OEM brand, so it should be a good quality part, and it looks it, and we'll be replacing it at the same time while I'm under there. So let's have a look and see what's involved. I've already removed the main under tray. I've got a drain tray here, some tools, and obviously something to lie down on since I'm doing this on the floor. Axle stand, jack, safety first as always, little rag to aid the process, and this is where the water pump and the thermostat are located. So this is the old water pump and the thermostat is just bolted to the side of it with those two fasteners there. It's just up here. So in order to get to it, my car has hydraulic power steering, so it's got the hydraulic power steering lines here. We'll have to move some of these pipes out of the way. We'll have to get the anti-roll bar out of the way, the two 13mm nuts on each side. We'll get these little brackets off for the under tray out of the way, and that will drop down. Once this can be swung out of the way, that will give us a little bit more access to get to the hoses. So we'll undo the hoses, drain the fluid, and then we'll unbolt the thermostat, unbolt those two fasteners there on the side of the block, and hopefully we'll be able to get to the one at the top. Looking at this water pump and going back on what I said earlier, it looks like this one already has the bushings in it, where on the N55 it was actually that there weren't any bushings in the water pump housing, so it was bolted directly to the side of the block, and the water pump compressor cover, if you like, or the propeller cover, this piece here, on the N55 is actually plastic, which is very prone to cracking, where on the N52 and N53 it's aluminium. So that's a big improvement, so one less common fault to worry about. But they still do fail. I do have a 325i which I recently purchased with a failed water pump, and that one is just refusing to function completely. So more on that on another video, but in this one, let's get cleared up and let's see if we can get this out in a reasonable time. plug. And this is the thermostat plug. That's good. Now 10 mils holding the thermostat to the water pump. Now I think I'm going to go to the top and try and unclip the hoses going to the thermostat housing. Right, so now undo the Jubilee clips from the water pump inlet and outlet pipes, hoses. The hoses are super tight on there, so even though the Jubilee clips are loose, I'm still struggling to get the thing off the water pump. But I can now get to all 3 bolts holding the water pump. So let me get a socket on there, see if I can get the water pump unbolted from the side of the block and then move it into a more suitable position to get the hoses off. So the bolts holding the pump to the side of the block are E-sockets. You're supposed to use an E-socket, so a female Torx, but you can also use a standard 10 mil and it'll work just fine. So let's go. And now onto the one at the very top, which is a nightmare to get to, but I'll try. So I think I'll use a shallow 10 mil with a ratchet and see if I can get it on there. And ready, there we go, loose. Lots of room in there, but it can still get it to work. Let me try a deep one because I'm struggling to get the rotation of the ratchet with the shallow socket just because of how tight the clearance is around there. Let's try it this way, see if that's going. Finally, pain in the backside that was. Lord Jesus, here we go, it's out, finally. Nothing really wrong with it, but we're replacing it anyway. So, as far as this job is concerned, it's not one of my favourites, as you can tell, because it's quite difficult to get to some of the bolts and it's quite awkward and the access is very limited. And if your car has power steering, these lines are in the way, so that makes things even more difficult, but we got there in the end. So now I'm going to try to remove the thermostat, get this Jubilee clip off and get the rest of the connectors off, replace the thermostat as well, and we can put it all back together. So that's it, they're out. And that's the Jubilee clip that I dropped. Happy days. Now I want to get in the new parts on. Right, so this is the old thermostat, finally out. This is the new one. They're more or less the same. I don't think they're made by the same company, because you can see the housings are ever so slightly different, but the spigots are all in the right place and it's all rated for the same temperature. This looks like the original BMW thermostat, and for some reason I can't see any other OEM branding on it, so any other manufacturer or supplier branding on it. So I couldn't tell you who it's made by, but that's irrelevant. So this is the new one. The only real difference I can spot on the new one versus the old one is the orientation of the sensor plug. It's that one's sort of this way and that one's this way, but not that it's got, that's not going to matter at all. So once it's in, the connector is still the same and the orientation of it doesn't actually matter. So the bit that I struggled with when removing the thermostat was getting to the Jubilee clips on these spigots and separating the rubber from the spigot, because where the Jubilee clip was holding the rubber on so tightly like that, the rubber sort of bonded itself onto the spigot and it was quite difficult to get it out. But you just got to use a screwdriver, work your way around and pry it slowly without damaging the actual hose, and it will come out eventually. And on the other end, so the bits that I had to unclip from the top were these two spigots here, and on them you have connectors which sort of have like a spring clip which needs to be raised up, for which I used this pick before they can be removed. And I'll try and show you what they look like. So this is what it looks like. You see, so that clip needs to be lifted up, and when you're reinstalling it, one tip is there is a rubber seal on the inside. Get a little bit of oil, dab the tip of your finger in the oil and lube this seal up, and then what you can do is you can pop this clip back on and slide it on, but it's going to be difficult to clip this on with the clip down. So I usually leave the clip up. I then reassemble the hose onto the spigot, make sure it's sitting home all the way in, and then I release this clip back in and just make sure that it's all nice and tight. So there's two of these, there's big one and the smaller one, and then two of the standard Jubilee clip spigot type ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this thermostat, this new thermostat on into there, get the back connectors on, get the front connectors on, and then I'm going to put the water pump on, get that top bolt in for the water pump, which is very difficult to get to, the one right up there. And then I can think about tightening down the hoses onto the water pump and onto the thermostat, and securing everything and bolting everything down properly. And a few moments later, this is what it looks like, all buttoned up with everything installed and the mechanical side of things taken care of. So the reassembly process is the reverse of disassembly process. Once everything goes back on, it's actually fairly straightforward, and I find that the reassembly process is actually easier than the disassembly process because nothing is seized. You're not struggling getting all the connectors off the spigots, and you're not struggling to get all the hoses off. They're trying to get onto the Jubilee clips and so on and so forth. And you're quite familiar with what you're doing by the time you're putting everything back together, so it all goes back fairly simple. So first things first, the thermostat goes back on. So the thermostat is located just under there. So pop the thermostat back on, get some of the hose connectors on it, and then get the water pump in there, get it bolted down to the side of the block, and just carry on, make sure everything is on the way it's supposed to be, button it all up, then you can reassemble the anti-roll bar, the little brackets that hold the hydraulic power steering lines, the brackets for the under trays. I've already put my under tray on, then I dropped the car down and went through the bleeding process. Now, as the bleeding procedure is concerned, as far as that's concerned, you want to make sure that the car is on nice level surface, is fairly level. Then what you need to do is you need to open this bleed valve and fill the expansion tank with coolant. Now, you need to use BMW recommended or BMW compatible fluid. It's usually blue or green, and this is the stuff that I managed to source yesterday from Halfords. It's to the same specification as genuine BMW coolant, and it's compatible with this car. Pour it into the expansion tank until the coolant starts coming out of the bleed hole, and until it starts, until all the bubbles stop coming out of this hole as well. So until you can actually see a nice steady stream of coolant coming out of here. So as that's going down, it'll take some time for all the air to come back up to the top, and you can just keep topping up the coolant until it starts coming out of this hole here, till the bleed hole. And that looks like that's it. That's the bleeding. The manual bleeding is done. There's no more air coming out of the bleed valve. So we can lock it down and then go and put the car into a bleeding mode. Mine has taken about 5.5, 6 litres of coolant. So all of this bottle and a little bit of this bottle. So I'd say maybe about 6 litres. And then what you've got to do is close the valve, take your key and jump in the car. You will need to flick the ignition on without starting the car. So if your key's not in the car, pop the key in, press the button twice. Do not press any of the pedals because obviously that will start the car. Put the heating on maximum heat and minimum speed, and leave that as it is. And then what you want to do is you want to press and hold the throttle pedal for about 10 to 12 seconds. And then the water pump will go into its bleed mode and it will start to bleed the system. So what you want to do is, if your battery is good, you want to leave the car as it is, let it go through the cycle, which will take about 10 minutes. And then you'll have to check the level. Once the water pump has stopped, you'll check the level in the expansion tank, make sure that the level is correct, which is what this is telling you. And then you could close the cap and be ready to go. You will have to cycle the ignition before starting the car, just in case. It's always good to do it after a repair like this. So just make sure you cycle it. And then start it up and we're good to go. There we are. Well, thanks again for watching. Hopefully you like this one and I'll see you again in the next one. Take care.